open the meeting of the zoning board for 5/16/2022. If you join me saying the pledge of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We'll review the agenda for tonight's meeting. The first item on the agenda was a public hearing for an area variance, which we have postponed that. The second item is for Stefano for an area variance at 5 Tarbell Avenue. Third item is Leon, a use variance located on Hoosick Road. The next item on the agenda is the first three were public hearings. The fourth item on the agenda is for changing visions of energy. It's an area variance for community solar energy farm. Fifth item is Atlas Renewable for a use area variance to operate 2 commercial solar facilities located at Shippey Lane, Brunswick Road. And North Troy Solar is also part of that. And North Troy Solar. Then we have one item of new business for 66 Pinewoods Avenue. We will approve the minutes of the Brunswick Zoning Board of Appeals for the regular meeting that was held on April 18th, 2022. Does anyone have any changes or corrections to the minutes?
No change.
Someone want to make a motion to approve?
Make a motion.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
The minutes from April 18th are approved with no changes. We've got 1 minute.
And we can note on the record that the first public hearing for Hickey, 5 Heather Ridge Road, is adjourned, and Chuck?
June 20th.
The June meeting? Yeah, so that'll be renoticed and held at your June meeting. Presumably at 6 p.m.
Yep. Okay, at this time, we will open the public hearing for 5 Tarbell Avenue for an area variance, and Attorney Gilchrist will read the notice of public hearing.
Notice of public hearing. Notice is hereby given that a public hearing will be held by the Zoning Board of Appeals of the Town of Brunswick at 6:15 p.m. on Monday, May 16, 2022, at the Brunswick Town Hall, 336 Town Office Road, Brunswick, New York, 12180, concerning the application submitted by Mark Schifano for an area variance for property located at 5 Tarbell Avenue. The application seeks a variance for a substandard lot size. Copies of the application are available at Brunswick Town Hall and are available for public inspection during regular business hours. All interested persons will be heard at the public hearing, and we will note for the record that this was published in the Eastwood Press, posted on the town signboard and the town website, and mailed to owners of property within 300 feet of the project site.
Would the representative for 5 Tarbell area please come up?
I think that's you, Paul.
Didn't know how. My name is Paul Angster. I'm here on behalf of Mr. Schifano, I believe is how you pronounce it, and his adjacent neighbor, Mr. Dominic Roselli, who's my client in this process. We have a contract to purchase a portion of Mr. Schifano's property, and our agreement requires me to make the application for the variance on behalf of Mr. Schifano. And as I understand it, the zoning ordinance requires a minimum lot size of 15,000 square feet. And Mr. Schifano has never owned that amount. I believe the lot size is 11,000 square feet. In the chain of title, if you examine the deeds, there's a question as to whether or not Mr. Roselli already owns part of that lot. He has a deed that says he does, and obviously Mr. Schifano has a deed that says that he owns the same portion of that lot. So we wanted to cure that problem, and Mr. Schifano wanted to reduce the size of his property. So we have purchased, or we have a contract to purchase a portion of Mr. Schifano's lot, which reduces his lot size from 11,000 down to approximately 8,400 square feet. It's a side yard, and Mr. Roselli is buying most of that side yard, if permitted. We have no plans to make any changes or make any use of the property other than to maintain it as a portion of Mr. Roselli's existing property, which fronts along Hoosick Road.
Mhm.
And I think that's it.
Do the board members have any questions for Mr. Rankin?
I don't know.
We are a pre-existing non-conforming lot.
Right. Okay. All right, at this time, we can open the floor for receipt of any public comments on this particular issue.
Looks like we're good. Apparently, there's no interest in this.
Have there been any written comments
We have
received?
received no written or email comments.
All right. And at this time, I make a motion that we close the public hearing.
Thank you.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Public hearing is closed. So I guess the one thing that we can look at is, with the side lot, what is the setback that the, structure has to be from the side lot? Does it still meet that requirement?
We're looking at a B15.
Yes,
That would be 10 foot.
it's 10 feet from the,
And I believe he has 15. It seems to be showing up here.
no, I mean from here, so he has enough. He has to be, he has,
That's 40 feet.
okay, perfect.
And then another 25. Oh, it's getting property line, so 65 feet. I believe this, no, that's a lot 44 line, so I was going to say that might be set back. But it comes up to that. These are those individual lots, actually, those 25 foot. Need both of them.
I guess we can go through and go. Explain how no undesirable change will be produced in the character of the neighborhood nor detriment to nearby properties created by granting the area variance.
So before we jump into the elements for the area
Yes.
variance, the action is subject to seeker review, because one of the lots is a commercial lot, and not strictly a residential application. There was an environmental assessment form filed with the application. So your first order of business is to determine whether the board thinks there's any potential for any significant adverse environmental impact from the area variance. And again, if the board thinks there is not the potential for significant adverse environmental impact from the action, there would be a motion to adopt the negative declaration under seeker.
So is it a type 2 under seeking?
It is not a type 2.
It's not.
Type 2 are for area variances or setbacks with respect to a residential use. And because one of the lots here is commercial, doesn't meet that definition, so you will need to, it's an unlisted action, but you'll need to make the seeker determination.
So do we take a vote on that we
Right,
accepted a negative declaration?
Correct. Yeah.
So I make a motion that we accept a negative declaration under seeker.
Second.
First.
So Pat made the motion to adopt
I'll
the
second it.
negative declaration. John seconded that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Now you can proceed with
Okay.
reviewing the elements.
Explain how no undesirable change will be produced in the character of the neighborhood nor a detriment to nearby properties created by granting the area variance. So this is already is a pre-existing non-conforming lot. It's just a matter of moving a portion of the square footage over to the other property, and it will not change anything in the neighborhood. Explain why the benefits sought by the applicant cannot be achieved by some method feasible for the application to pursue other than an area variance.
There's no other property that they can transfer over, so it's the only option.
Right. Describe whether the requested area variance is substantial. So we're looking to move about 2,000 square feet. It's not substantial.
And then that one, I think it's important that the record notes, it is already a substandard lot for size under the zoning law. This would further reduce it, but retain its character as a residential lot.
Explain how the proposed area variance will not have an adverse effect on the physical and environmental conditions in the neighborhood or district. There'll be no environmental or physical impact. They're just transferring property from one deed to another. So there are no environmental impacts. Explain what are the difficulties self-created. Consideration is relevant, but shall not necessarily preclude the granting of the area variance.
If I could on this one, note for the record, the applicant's attorney, Mr. Angster, did note that there may be a question already under the existing deed and the change of title. So given that, even on the issue of whether this is self-created, it seems to be created by maybe a question in the chain of title. Even if it is deemed self-created, it's relevant but not determined.
So at this time, I would like to make a motion that we grant the area variance. Would someone like to second? All in favor?
Aye.
The area variance is granted.
Thank you very much.
Yep, and we will note for the record that this was referred to the county, and the county had no, it did not conflict with county plans, and that local consideration shall prevail, so that.
My next step was to return to the planning board for what we're calling a property line adjustment, surely what it is.
It would fall, Chuck, I think the application for a waiver, correct?
It is an application for waiver, but
In the
It
nature
seems
of
like-
lot line adjustment.
people like to call it that now, the property line adjustment.
Yes.
Yeah.
It sounds less involved, right?
Which makes it simple.
We're gonna
have to stamp those, right?
Not tonight, it'll be at the planning board. Yeah, tonight was just the variance to allow the.
And I'll just check with the planning board and find out when they want to reschedule.
Yeah.
All right, very good. Thank you very much. Have a good night.
Take care.
Right up.
Public hearing notice.
Okay, this time we'll open the public hearing for, Hoosick Road. Let's see. The applicant seeks a use variance in connection with the extension of a parking lot in a residential zone on property located on Hoosick Road.
Hey, Walt, public's supposed to see it. This gentleman's coming around here.
Good evening, Walt Whitman from MJ Engineering, representing Dave Leon.
Yeah, let me read the notice. Right, just for the record. That's okay. Notice of public hearing. Notice is hereby given that a public hearing will be held by the zoning board of appeals of the town of Brunswick at 6:30 p.m. on Monday, May 16, 2022, at the Brunswick Town Hall, 336 Town Office Road, Brunswick, New York, 12180, concerning the application submitted by David Leon for a use variance for property located at Hoosick Road and Hillcrest Avenue. The applicant seeks a use variance to allow commercial parking in an R9 zoning district. Copies of the application are available in the Brunswick Town Hall and are available for public inspection during regular business hours. All interested persons will be heard at the public hearing. This notice was published in the Eastwick Press, placed on the town signboard and town website, and mailed to owners of properties located within 300 feet of the project site.
As Mr. Gilchrist said, we're here for a use variance. As you know, this project was previously approved back in, I believe it was summer of 2021. Since that time, the property owner, Mr. Leon, was able to purchase a small rectangular piece of property, 1 acre of land. The door jutted out into his property, the parking lot kind of went around that with a retaining wall. He was able to purchase that property. He would like to put some additional parking. It was always topic of discussion during the original planning board phase that they thought the gym could utilize some more parking. So this parking is to accommodate the Planet Fitness facility. It's 22 additional parking spaces that would be provided for the gym use. There was a previously approved variance for an R9 originally that came just in front of this parcel that was purchased. So it's basically extended it a little bit further south and east to accommodate this new rectangular parcel. So all in all, additional parking for the gym within that newly purchased 0.1 acre piece of property.
Well, originally behind Planet Fitness, there were supposed to be 10 spots, and then they reduced it down to 8.
When the parking was not angular, maybe?
Yes.
I believe that's why there was the reduction. And the parking was not angular because there was a retaining wall there, so you actually had more surface, up at that elevation to be able to use. Now that you're tapering the hill back and there's a substation right there, your grade cannot be that great where you have to come back up into that area and you don't have the room to park, at a 90-degree angle behind Planet Fitness.
So behind Planet Fitness, there was a wall.
Retaining wall, yeah.
And originally that was perpendicular parking.
So this is the original.
See the way the parking right there?
Yeah.
Because of that retaining wall and that retaining wall right there. Those retaining walls are gone, it's just gonna be all one taper, and because of that.
I was wondering if it's because now they have this direction to come to this.
Yeah, I don't.
No, the main reason for that was a field pollution. There is a National Grid pole, which is outside the parking lot. However, there was 2 guy wires that the original plan was to relocate them out of the pavement, out of the pavement to utilize that for parking. However, it was kind of a snowball effect that if those guy wires were moved, it would then result in moving various adjacent poles. So it could be not just that one, it could be going downstream to that pole, and upstream to that pole. And if you did that, it would actually push the pole that's supposed to have all these into their parking lot area. So what we ended up doing is leaving the guy wires in its place. By doing that, we would reduce the aisle width to 18 feet. By reducing it to 18 feet, we had to then angle the parking to make that just one way going to the east.
Do you have any questions?
I have a couple. So with the arrows that are on the ground showing that direction around the back of the Planet Fitness, is there going to be appropriate signage that might say one way do not enter from the Aldi's looking towards the Planet Fitness parking area?
We
in the
will
back of the
be
building?
placing on do not enter.
Okay.
Yes.
Is there any intent on any truck traffic to go behind Planet Fitness to get to all these, or is the intent for all the truck to come into,
No,
trucks to
the
come in the
truck.
main entrance,
Yeah, the truck traffic will remain. as it
swing
was
in there and
originally
try to back
planned.
up to their loading dock?
Yeah, and also for KFC, the plan for KFC was it will come up and around, in the front of, on the back side of the gym, on the west side of the gym, and then go out to the lake. With that, the truck pattern for all the facilities will not change.
I think the only thing that I would like to see that the possibility is you have the sidewalk that goes along the side of the Planet Fitness that I almost kind of think about the sidewalk that connects to Market 32 to where the Dollar Tree is. There's a small crossing walk there. So you've got that same situation here in the back of the building where people are going to be walking where they might have a more defined area to a sidewalk and a crosswalk to get onto the sidewalk on the side of the Planet Fitness. You know, and the same thing with the parking of the proposed area, that it kind of directs them to walk maybe onto a sidewalk and then cross over. I just see a lot of pedestrian traffic in this whole complex, and a lot of traffic as far as vehicle traffic. And I just see that that's a recipe for disaster, because there's going to be people walking all over the place between AFC and Planet Fitness, and if they can't find parking to go to all these, you're going to be walking all across this complex. So I think the more crosswalks and signage and sidewalks that you can have directing people onto them, rather than having them walking freely through the parking lot, would be better.
Sure.
So if there's a possibility to do that, I see a little concrete pad. Is that for a dumpster or?
It is,
Okay.
yes.
Here you see.
This little pad.
Okay.
I just didn't know if there could be a sidewalk there that would end up perpendicular to the sidewalk along the side of Planet Fitness with some signage and maybe some crosswalk markings on the ground to direct all those people that are parking there to walk onto the sidewalk and walk across and then onto the sidewalk along Planet Fitness.
Yeah. And then cross over in the back of the building.
Exactly.
To that sidewalk.
Yeah.
Is this intended to be patient parking or employee parking?
Excuse me.
Is it intended to be patient parking or employee parking? Customer parking?
It could be either, but most likely customer parking. Because there is no designated employee parking.
Are the parking spots designated for certain areas for certain businesses? So like say, for example, a coffee hut, I know you said there's only going to be like 2 people working in there.
Yeah, no,
But will it
It's
say
a
all these
shared-
parking only here or?
no, it can be intermingled. This, for instance, KFC has signed off and is on board with this additional parking for the gym facility.
Okay.
Yes, this was run by them, and we did receive an email which was presented, submitted to the town as part of this application.
So is the parking that you're proposing, is it on KFC portion of the property?
A portion of it is, yes. Yes, the western, I guess the southernmost is, yes.
Is part of KFC?
You're supposed to be the first one. Now they're adding to it.
That's why we just wanted to make sure that they were comfortable with what was being proposed.
Right. Or gives them more parking?
So it's gonna be general parking for just, you want it and to any of the businesses, you use that.
Correct. We're envisioning it more for the gym. Obviously KFC could use it. Things may change. We would think the majority of the people are now using the drive-through. But if they go inside, there is, adequate parking for them to utilize.
Well, that wasn't under our proper purview, but I never really understood why they designed it that way, because if there's really not a lot of eat-in customers, you would think they would have flipped the building and put it on the other side where the drive-through went along the property line, and you got your bulk of parking where the building is and closer to the Planet Fitness Club. That really didn't fall under our our purview to question, I guess, but. Any other questions on that?
Any more questions?
No.
Okay, at this time, we'll open up the public hearing for any comments from anyone that would like to make a comment. If you step forward to the mic and state your name and your address.
I'm Bill Friars, address is 310 Ave. You're extending, it appears, the parking area in this area here, correct? This is this?
Yes.
Okay. And a couple of questions. Relative to lighting in the parking lot, how is that going to be handled? Is it going to be 24/7, just how operating? What fixtures are you looking at?
It's-
Are you looking at?
It's this pictures that were originally there, they're 15 feet on poles, down like 15 foot tall, yes. Direct down, shielded.
The other thing, relative to snow management, snow removal, how is that going to be handled, and is that going to potentially infringe on, anything outside the parking lot? You know, you see, January, you got 12 feet, 20 feet high clouds.
Yeah, they'll have all this property here, they'll come in this utilizing that space for the most part in that area.
Spring runoff, that'll be some other time.
That's all curb, so all spring in through here.
You
makes it melt.
were saying snow will be plowed here?
For this new parking lot,
Yes.
they can put it here, they can bring it up and around and back and through here. There's several other areas of green space that they can put the snow. If they have to get rid of it, they can.
It's just expanding the amount of surface area that's got to be, they have snow dealt with.
Yep.
So it's increasing the volume, and it's also increasing the amount of spring runoff.
Mhm.
Has that been taken into consideration
It has been,
in sizing of the retention pond?
yes.
So that was redone, or we did the analysis for the first time with the design of the retention pond, with the assumption that this is going to be here?
Yes, so back in, I want to say October, we came back with, we did it twice, we came back in October, we did a site plan amendment at that time because there was stormwater basin back in here originally, I don't know if we were familiar enough with it. We ended up eliminating this and making a basin larger in the back. We actually doubled the size of that. We didn't know at the time, but we did put some clay into that basin at that time. When we just came back now with this other amendment that we're looking at, making a few adjustments, we reran the calcs, and this basin back here, yes, can accommodate this additional purpose area. So that stormwater report has been recalculated, yes.
So other than this parking lot, are there other items that are included in the amendment that you're requesting?
That's for the site, for the planning board. Yes.
I'm not sure I understood the response. It's not you, it's me.
No, so this is a two-part process.
Yep.
We're in front of the planning board right now for site plan modifications.
Yep.
As part of this one modification, it is going within an R9 zone. In order to have a use of parking, you need a variance for that. So that's how we came in front of the ZBA. So, yes, we are in front of the planning board. We angled this parking, and this was originally for parking. All these had a cart corral both on the south side of the property and on the north side. They no longer need the north side corral, so we were able to get rid of that and added a couple parking spaces here. Wendy's, since this was approved, No longer their building configuration changed due to their internal operations. They originally had a drive-through and a bypass lane. They no longer need that bypass lane. So actually for there, we're removing impervious cover. And this is just a single lane that goes around the building now. And also proposing a drive-through facility here in the middle. So those were the, I think it's four items that we are in front of the planning board with.
Any other public comments? This time I'll make a motion that we close the public comment portion of the hearing.
Confirm there's no written comments.
Oh, that's right. Any written comments, Chuck?
There were no written or email
No
comments.
written. Make a motion that we close the public hearing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Public hearing is closed.
So I will go over a couple of things with the board. One, note that the zoning law as well as the New York State town law do allow you 62 days in which to make a determination on the use variance. As Mr. Lipman did indicate, there are matters pending in front of the planning board, one of which the planning board has deliberated on the need for a public hearing on one of the proposed site plan amendments. And that is yet to be scheduled by the planning board. It is not in relation to the proposed parking area. We'll have to review. I will need to review this with the planning board review engineer for purposes of making the secret determination and the amendment to the existing findings that were previously done. I want to make sure that the seeker is properly coordinated between this board on the use variance as well as any site plan amendment by the planning board. So there are just some sequential issues that I want to go over with the planning board. And due to that, and again, reminding you that you do have 62 days in which to render your determination. I think the board is advised to let the planning board process at least another meeting to have the ability to discuss seeker coordination issues. When the planning board is going to be holding a public hearing and propose additional use. Mr. Lipman did, I believe, submit that additional information to the planning board that it had requested.
We did.
You did that.
And we are on agenda for Thursday.
Correct.
Yes, and at that point, we would be asking if they are going to proceed with a public hearing, if we could get that scheduled.
Correct. So certainly my advice would be to have the planning board get that information reviewed. Let me coordinate with the planning board review engineer on seeker and possibly add this to your June agenda for deliberation and potential action.
Need a motion to table that?
I think certainly we'll let the record note that the matter will be placed on your June agenda for deliberation.
I'll make a motion to table tonight's vote. So next month's meeting.
A second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Well, actually, I have one more quick question for you. If I can ask one more quick question. Did you say that there's not going to be any cart corral on the properties at all, or?
No. All these are originally proposed two.
Two? Okay.
Yep. There's one here that's staying.
Okay.
And there was one here on the north end.
But not out in the parking lot like you see out in Walmart or Market 32 that takes up a couple parking spots, no cart corrals of that nature?
No.
Aldi's is very different in that you have to get a quarter for the shopping cart. You have to pay for the shopping cart and then you get the quarter back. That's the way they work it. So the shopping carts are brought back.
Gotcha.
To get your quarterback.
I've seen these with the parking lot cut out. So
I was just curious. I wasn't, thank you.
Different.
You did close the public hearing early, so that does, that procedurally is done. And Walt, I don't know if you received the copy, but we did get the county recommendation on the use variance.
okay, I did not.
It does indicate that this would not have a major impact on county plans and local consideration. Okay.
Thank you.
I'll get a copy of that to you.
Okay, yep. Have a good night.
Thank you.
The next agenda item is changing visions of energy, CBE of North America.
Hello. How are you?
Good, how are you? Just want to give us a little brief overview of the project at this point.
Sure. We've been running the town of Brunswick for a little while now. We've made a lot of progress. It's a 4 megawatt community solar farm at the end of Bel Air Lane. We've received secret negative declaration from the planning board and held a joint public hearing with the ZBA and the planning board. We had a meeting to review comments that were raised at the public hearing with the ZBA. The previous ZBA meeting, we reviewed our responses to all those comments, and we are seeking to get an area variance. So our 4 megawatt community solar farm spans 2 different parcels. So there's an internal lot line that we need a variance from, as well as a variance for above ground utility poles. Seeking it, hopefully get that resolution for that area variance passed, approved tonight, and attend the planning board meeting on Thursday. And also hopefully get a resolution for a special use permit and site plan approval at that meeting.
Does anybody have any questions? I have a couple questions.
Yeah.
Is it possible for visual impact of the proposed utility poles?
Yeah, and at the end of Bel Air Lane, they will be visible. So they will be extending from the final pole at the end of Bel Air Lane. Beyond that, onto the Chuck McCabe, Virginia Richard Vato parcel. And I believe there's 5 of them. They'll hold various pieces of utility equipment. It's a bit of a safety measure to elevate that equipment off the ground. This is the recommended installation technique from National Grid that all this equipment is installed above ground on these separate utility poles. That's per the guidelines from National Grid. They'll be about 45 feet tall each.
So you said there's one utility pole at the end of Bel Air, and then there'll be 5 more installed?
Yes. In close, not as spread out as along Bel Air Lane. They'll be in closer proximity to each other. And then eventually the wiring will dive underground and onto our site, into the equipment of the solar facility.
So, we had another, solar farm similar to this one that they, there was a potential that they could have used 7 poles lined up in their plan, but they proposed 2 poles with a pad mount. And that was approved by National Grid. Is that something that could be a possibility for this project?
It could be a possibility, but they're not recommending that for us right now. I think we've asked about this, a couple months ago when we were first appearing in front of the Zoning Board of Appeals. And they responded to us that this is the design they'd want to see per these specific regulations.
I just wonder why they would.
Yeah,
One of our
and they,
solar farms to-
we reached out to them, our contact at National Grid, and then we followed up with them and same response. I think maybe once we get to construction and things get a little more detailed with National Grid, and they're coordinating with us on a project execution basis, more day-to-day. We have a construction schedule with National Grid. Maybe there's a little bit of wiggle room at that point to further design these above-ground poles. But right now, they've blocked us. I've been resistant to it.
At that point, you'll never be able to get the switchgear ordered and have it in time. To have the disconnect done at ground level.
Yeah, it might be different equipment, you're saying?
Yeah. Borrego on Brick Church Road, they have the ground mounted disconnect.
2 pole.
Yeah. It's a monstrous, steel enclosure. You have to be able to control the arc of these being disconnected. When you disconnect the electrical circuit under this load, there is a lot of arcing. When you're up in the air, that's your safety factor because your air is pretty much inert. So.
Yeah, that's the response we got, that they prefer to have this up in the air. Now, I think the visual impacts will be limited, given where they're located at the end of Bel Air Lane, located on property that's owned by the located on property that's benefiting from the solar farm. It's the only people that will get to the point of seeing these above ground poles are the property owners. Virginia Ritrovato and her son Chuck and Kate. So Virginia Ritrovato is the property where the facility is located, and then we have an easement across her son's property, Chuck and Kate, and it's really tucked away. All the neighbors at that point will have already turned off into their homes.
So there'll be no visibility from the other neighbors.
Correct.
Yes, any questions?
I have a couple on the poles. How far apart would they be, like from the first to last one?
Yeah, I'd have to look at the plans.
Does it take up 100 yards? Does it take up 300 yards?
You know, I'd say maybe, they're not too far spaced apart. I think maybe 20, 30 feet apart from each other.
Every pole is 45 feet up?
Yeah. Yep, same height. These telephone poles, these utility poles will be like the poles out along the road, and they're more feet than you think. I thought they were 20 feet, but they're about 40, 45. Yeah.
So the starting elevation of the pole, the base of the pole, they're all pretty much, I mean, you don't, one's not going up on a hill, so it's gonna be higher.
Yeah, where they are, I think there's minimal grade.
Okay.
It's not a steep portion of the property. There's a road there. It's a less than 10% grade. There's an existing access road.
So if I could, as the applicant's representative indicated, they're in front of the zoning board tonight for the two requested area variances. They are also in front of the planning board for special use permitted site plan. The planning board is really the primary board reviewing the overall site. And in conjunction with that, the planning board does generally and has for this commercial solar project approved the town, and a series of conditions that it would attach to its action. I've been working with the planning board review engineer on proposed conditions for discussion at Thursday evening's planning board meeting, and I thought it'd be helpful if we could simply step through them, noting on the record that these are a draft form only and have not yet been deliberated by the planning board, but I thought it'd be helpful so that the board understood the types of conditions that the planning board are considering before you address your area variance issues. Personally. So if I step through these, first, any action by the planning board subject to posting and maintenance of financial security for decommissioning of the commercial solar facility equipment conforming content acceptable to the town. There is a decommissioning requirement under the town's code. Subject to any final comments from the planning board review engineer of the town of Brunswick Water Department on the final stormwater plan for the facility. And their notice of intent to comply with the DEC general stormwater construction permit. Coordination with local emergency services on-site facilities, layout, equipment access, and provide training. All panels used for the solar facility must have anti-glare coating or consistent materials that will not produce offensive glare. The applicant's representative did state earlier that seeker was completed, and it was completed on the project. The town board served as lead agency in conjunction with the limited zoning amendment needed for the project. It was determined that there was not the potential for any significant adverse environmental impact. Visual was assessed by the town board as part of the seeker review. No further removal of any vegetation from the property without further review and approval by the planning board. The tree cutting on site is limited to their tree clearing limits as shown on the grading, drainage, and utility plans. We'll note that there was a very recent revision, not really substantive on the site layout, but it did note, as I'll get to in a moment, that herbicides will not be used in conjunction with the project. All approvals of the PSC as needed filed with the town of Brunswick. Access is limited to the access off Bel Air Lane as depicted on the site plan, with no access off North Lake Avenue. Waste materials generated during the site construction, which include packaging materials, removed within a reasonable period of time. Security fence around the perimeter of the solar facility is a deep link, 8-foot-high fence with an Knox box installed for emergency access at the entry gate. National Electric Code requirements must be adhered to. And here we get to use of pesticides or herbicides is prohibited. A note has been added to the project plans. Lighting regulations under the town solar law must be complied with. The project will require a pilot agreement and also a stormwater management facilities maintenance and easement agreement. Since there will be construction vehicles using Bel Air Lane, there'll be a requirement for a pre-construction inspection of the road and a post-construction inspection, and any damage to the road noted pre and post-construction must be repaired by the applicant. It gives construction days and hours, strict compliance with the site plan, and there are some federal wetland issues on the site. Carson, I think it's limited to the area of your access road. Yeah, and there'll be a nationwide permit for that, and we'll just need compliance that the Corps agrees that coverage under that nationwide permit has been issued. So these are some conditions that the planning board will be considering. They're generally the types of conditions that the planning board considers on commercial solar projects. And thought it would be a good idea for the zoning board to understand that when considering the elements for the two requested area variances. And as Carson did note, one of the requested area variances is the setback requirements on an internal lot line. The site is comprised of a few parcels, and that variance does allow the project to be more centered on the project site to increase the buffer to offsite properties. And obviously the area variance and poles that you've already delivered, or at least started to deliver.
So we go through the deliberation now.
Right. Now, one of the issues for the board to consider is if you want to handle the two requested area variances together and make one motion for the required area variances for the project, or deal with them separately.
I think they have some similarities where we probably act them on at the same time.
You have done that in the past, and I think that would be appropriate. Well, if you'd like, I can step through the elements and then the board can deliberate on those. So for the requested area variance, as we know, the board has to determine whether there is any unnecessary hardship, and you balance the benefits of the applicant as opposed to a detriment to the neighborhood in particular, the community at large. And in doing that, you look at a series of factors. The first factor being whether the requested area variances for the project would result in an undesirable change, reducing the character of the neighborhood, or create a detriment to nearby properties. And again, I'll note on this element that the town board has approved a zoning amendment for part of the project site to allow the commercial solar. And on the balance of the project site, the site is zoned properly for large-scale commercial solar.
So there's no impact to surrounding properties. So I would say that there will be no undesired change. There's any character of the neighborhood or any detriment to nearby properties. Or either. Of the requested variances.
Okay, next, you consider whether the benefits sought by the applicant could be achieved by a feasible alternative. And on this, I will note for the record that the planning board did look at the site as a whole, spent a lot of time reviewing the access road and its location and its specification. And the current site plan has fully responded to the planning board's comments on those issues.
Well, we had a discussion tonight about the number of poles and a possible option, but it appears that National Grid is the one that's driving the request for the overhead poles. So there wouldn't be another option for the applicant. And as far as the internal setback, it's property, it's really one piece of property. And so that would have no impact either. And there's no other option there either.
Okay, next, determine whether the variance is substantial. Certainly on the internal lot line, we've discussed that that variance actually centers the proposed panels more on the project site. Really, your issue here is the number of poles.
Well, it is substantial based on what our zoning law states, but again, as we said, National Grid is the one that's requesting that they have the overhead poles and the number of poles. So it's a wash, I believe.
Okay, next, you must look at whether the area variance would have an adverse effect on the physical or environmental condition in the neighborhood. And again, we'll note here that the town board did serve as secret lead agency, did review all the potential adverse environmental impacts and determined that there is not the potential for a significant impact from the action.
So just based on that.
That satisfies that.
Right, that satisfies that requirement.
And lastly, whether the difficulty is self-created with respect to the requested area variances. And on that score, we focus first on the internal setback. I suppose it could be viewed by the board as being self-created, but the benefit is it increases the exterior buffer. And as to the poles, you've discussed about the National Grid requirements. Right.
So then I would make a motion that we approve the area variance for the 0 setback from the internal lot line and the variance on the number of poles from 2 to 6.
The total number of poles?
I think it's 5 or 6.
5. Well, you said there's already one existing.
Yeah. I'd have to check the plans to see if we are installing 5 or 6.
I would suggest if the board is amenable.
I can check quickly.
Well, you could, a motion to approve up to 6
Up
Up
to
to
6.
6 is sufficient. Yep.
Andy, do we need to add the stipulation that if National Grid changes the design where a pad mount is then acceptable, that we could change it to that as well? Or
Well, again, by making the motion of up to 6 poles, that doesn't preclude that from going down. Correct. And if I could, it'd be inappropriate conditions to the variances would be subject to planning board review and approval of the special use permit and site plan.
Second motion, approve the variance.
All in favor?
Aye.
For variances.
Thank you very much.
That'll be identified in the minutes. More likely, the planning board Thursday evening will have separate resolutions to review.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much. Have a good night.
You too.
Bye.
Put the screen up.
She's still here, been waiting on new business.
Good. Okay.
Very nice. That's certainly up to the board's discretion.
No
Yes.
problem with
All right, this is for 662 Pinewoods Avenue. You're looking to replace your existing garage
Correct.
with a new garage and new to the side?
Carport.
Like a carport on the side. And you're asking for 3 area variances. One for the total size, the square footage. The second is for the front setback, and the third is for the rear setback.
Okay.
So you want to explain your project, what you're looking to do?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name's Brian Lee. My wife Kelly Lee, and I own the property at 662 Pinewoods. We bought the property in 2009 with existing garage. It was not in good shape at that point in time. It's really not in good shape now. Practically falling down. I thought it was going to blow away today, quite frankly. So we're looking to tear it down and replace it with a brand new garage. And essentially use the same general footprint of the existing garage for the new garage. So the setback going towards Grandview Ave, the side street, would not be any different. And the rear setback would not be any different. The new garage is larger, and it does have the carport. It would extend further into our yard, for sure. But in terms of the setbacks, it wouldn't be any different than what is existing currently. And the other factor here, I think, too, is the driveway is set up to go to the garage, depending on if we had to relocate the existing or the new garage, whatever that means. That might mean that we would have to relocate the driveway as well. That would certainly be an additional expense. Our septic system is on the Grandview side, in that little island of grass, sort of. It's hard to describe, you have to visualize it. But we got a little area of grass there, and our septic system is on that side, on the Grandview side. If we had to relocate the garage or the new garage, I don't know whether that would be impacted or not. I'm just simply pointing that out as a potential factor. But really, I think this comes down to 2 things. We have a smallish lot, it's less than a half an acre, and we're on a corner lot. So I don't know where we put this garage. It's not going to lead us to having these setback issues. I think it's really the sum and substance of the area. It's 0.42 acres.
Just exact.
Only because I didn't put the survey. We had a
So
survey.
where is your septic on this, map?
Can I flip this over?
I gave everybody a satellite, so you can show it here as well.
So that's where it says utility access cover, that's our septic.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, this is this little
Yeah.
grassy area, this is our driveway, that's the garage. This is where our septic is, right there.
So you're proposing a 32 by 32 foot garage,
Correct.
and then it's like 11 feet, 9 1/4 inches by 32 carport.
Right.
Any questions?
No questions.
So, it appears that the application is complete, and we can schedule you for a public hearing. And our next meeting is June 20th.
Okay.
And do you already have a public hearing at 6? Okay, so it would be 6:15
That's fine.
on
June 20th.
June 20th.
That's our anniversary.
That's fine.
Yeah, it is, honest to God.
So do you want
Hopefully we'll
you
get
should
good
have a
news.
date ready for you? Just an approval. How many years?
13 this year. We've been together though, 18 overall.
Nice.
Congratulations.
Thank you. We won't forget that day.
All right. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Appreciate it.
All right, thank you.
Thanks for y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's all.
Good evening, ma'am. Thank you for making the time again. We submit an application, almost 100 pages. It is not our intention to make it so long. We wanted to make comprehensive. I passed by your offices by Thursday last week.
Yes.
I delivered a copy.
Yeah, okay, on Thursday, yeah.
Great. Do you want to start with the announcement of Binghamton or? I think that you will explain that.
Okay. Very quickly, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Dave Brennan with the law firm Young Summer out of Albany. And Lewis is just asking me, we've been questioned over various meetings with other municipalities about whether we've secured a use variance using the public utility use variance standard. And in fact, last Monday night, the town of Binghamton were granted such a variance using an analysis and data comparable to the presentation that we've been presenting over the past months here in the town of Brunswick. And so we don't yet have in our possession the written decision on that, but it's forthcoming. And once we have that, we'll certainly share it. But it is in large part exactly the same analysis that we've been providing here to the town. And I know that's a question that's been asked at different times during the course.
Right, if I could add, and we'll just jump in on that issue, because I was gonna raise it tonight. I'm glad you raised that as well, is the application materials that have certainly been fashioned around the public utility use variance. And it's interesting that the applicant has said the town of Binghamton applied the public utility use variance standard and has taken action on that. And that'd be great to submit that. The reason I would raise it is it's come to the board's attention that there are other municipalities, correct, that are struggling, or at least it's undetermined what the applicable standard would be. One such as, I'm aware of a project in the city of Butlersville where we're dealing with this issue. And I'll bring the attention to the board that I also represent some parties in another municipality dealing with a similar use variance application for a large-scale commercial solar project. This one's in the town of Amsterdam, where in that case, both the applicant and the board is reviewing that project under the general use variance standards. So it does seem to be undetermined at this point. My request would be, and it seems to dovetail, Dave, with what you just said, was if there is, to complete the record in front of this board, submission that addresses what constitutes a public utility in New York, both under general New York principles and as applicable if defined under the Brunswick zoning law, as it relates to the application of the public utility use variance standard or the Rosenberg standard. And in this particular case, how does this applicant factually meet that standard as a public utility? I think that submission will be helpful for the board in reviewing the application. If you've got an example of a recent board, be it Binghamton or other place, that has in fact applied the public utility use variance standard, that's something that the board should review. Well, note for the record, I have had the opportunity to discuss this issue at length with Ron LaBerge, the review engineer, who is here tonight as well. And we did concur that that information will be helpful on the overall review.
Understood. Absolutely. Thank you.
Still to with all this information.
Thank you.
Just for your information, we have all the projects of the towns where the public utility standard, in our views, does not apply because, for instance, in the town of Bethlehem, that project specifically, the parcel has some specific features that qualifies for a standard use variance. In Brunswick, in Binghamton, where the uniqueness is the connection to the grid, then we are applying for a use variance. I'm sure that they will experiment that mean will provide all this information. With the town of Binghamton, this is my view. Up to now, the town of Brunswick, we have been focused very much on the engineering side, on the technical side. In the town of Binghamton, we started first, is this public service? Is this utility? Prove that soon. we move first with the legal questions and then we move to the technical questions. Probably in terms of project will be the opposite process. But yes, absolutely, we will be very happy to provide this information. It was Monday last week, so it has been very recent. Thank you for making the time. I would propose that I will try to make it digestible. Again, this 100 pages, it's not our intention to make it long, it's the intention to make it comprehensive. The last time that we met, there was one critical question that, hey, in the town of Brunswick, there are plenty of land. Why you are selecting these parcels? Can you check if in other parcels which are properly zoned, you cannot install a solar farm? And this is the exercise that we have done today. It's the cover letter plus 6 exhibits. Exhibit A responds the first question. Exhibit B responds the second question with the support of Exhibit C, D, and E, and Exhibit F responds the final questions. I will try to go through, and I will try to not to be very boring, and as much as digestible as possible. The first question by April 15th on the Robert Group letter was that please provide the map with the parcels which based on the topography, physical characteristics, sufficient area, slopes, environmental, they are qualified for a solar farm within the town of Brooklyn. This is Exhibit A. If you please take Exhibit A, you will see a map which was already submitted by us by, I would say, March. This map is based on the Verge Group work, and on top of that map, we have added the national feeder lines. So, the background with the colors, yellow color is a properly zoned parcel. It's the Verge Group work. We do not challenge this work. We think that this is correct. What we have added is the feeder lines from national grid. The different colors of all. First, these rectangles, 1, 2, and 3, corresponds to the 3 substations within the town of Brunswick. And the different lines with different colors corresponds to the different capacity available on this line. So, a red color, like this one, the capacity would be 0.3 megawatt, without any extension, without any improvement. If you want to install more capacity, it is technically possible, yes. At which cost? In the last meeting, we explained it, and we provide some examples from National Grid, corresponding with National Grid, that it's, in this case, will be $1 million per mile. $1 million per mile. Okay, so we do not challenge this. This is, in our view, a correct map. And what we are trying to do with the second question is to split this map in different areas and analyze area by area, trying to cover all the parcels within the town of Brunswick. The second question was that for parcels within a reasonable distance, because reasonable distance may have a meaning for you different from me, we have covered all the parcels. Obviously, those parcels which are far away from the substation, under the assumption of $1 million per mile, doesn't make sense. But in any case, we do not want to discard any parcel, so we select all the feeder lines. We're trying to make sure that a parcel is feasible, possible from the economic point of view, yes or no. If you don't mind, if you go to page number 2 of the cover letter, you will see a flow chart like this. And I don't want to make it complicated, but the process that we are following for every parcel of the different areas is that first we'll check the feeder line. has the feeder line capacity? Yes or no? What does it mean the feeder line has capacity? Okay, we know through a letter from National Grid that the maximum megawatts that you can install in a 30-20 kilowatts line is 10 megawatt, approximately 10 megawatt. It's on Exhibit C of this application. So what does it mean a feeder line has capacity, available capacity? Okay, that the installed capacity and the capacity on the queue are below 10 megawatt. Again, why 10 megawatt? Approximately, it's 10 point something. Exhibit C, the correspondence with National Grid, clarifies that maximum for 13.2 kilowatts, you can install 10 megawatt. Okay, we'll check if there is capacity, yes or no. If there is available capacity, we'll check the capacity on the substation. A feeder line has capacity, but what about the substation? So we'll check if the substation has available capacity. What does it mean that a substation has available capacity? Okay, I have provided the screenshots from National Grid website. What we have to check is the thermal capacity of each substation. And we have to compare the thermal capacity of this substation with the installed capacity and the capacity of the queue. Let's say that a substation has a 20 megawatt thermal capacity, and the installed capacity is already 15, and there is another 5 megawatt on the queue. This 20 megawatt minus 15 megawatt installed minus 5 megawatt on the queue makes the available capacity in this substation 0. We will see different cases. So, first, is there any available capacity in the feeder line? Yes, no. Is there any available capacity in the substation? Yes, no. If there is available capacity in the substation, how much capacity is in the substation? We'll see that there are one substation with 1.7 megawatt and 1.4 megawatt. Does this make a project economically feasible? I have capacity in the feeder line, great. I have capacity in the substation, great. How much capacity I have in the substation? 1.4 megawatt. Does this project, this 1.4 megawatt, a project economically feasible? Yes or no? No. Associated improvements? Certainly not. So this is the rationale that we will try to follow with every of the parcels that we are checking on all the feeder lines in Brunswick municipality. Please stop me at any time for any question, for any clarification. I know that this is very technical, and I will try to make it as easy as possible.
Just a very quick question. So the substations you sell, are they all within the town, or I mean, there's some around the town too, correct? They aren't physically within the town, but they, I think there's one down in Bush.
Yeah, correct. We have not mapped other. This is Troy. This is the city of Troy, and here there are other substations with other wool feeder lines with other, let's say, available capacity. The problem is that you can imagine that this is residential areas, and in a practical terms, you're trying to find 5 acres available. It's impossible.
Well, I was just curious from the distance from parcels that are zoned appropriately.
Mhm.
So say at
No,
the
no.
southern end of the map, is there anything in town that's near the town border?
We can extend, if you want, these feeder lines. And let's say that we have a project here that finally connects to Sikawai substation. We'll check that there are some parcels which are qualifying for solar here and here, and we will disqualify these parcels because of the improvements on the feeder lines. So a parcel here, which is the distance, the improvement that you need, all this is longer than this parcel, or even this parcel, or even this parcel, disqualify this parcel. I'm not sure if there are parcels here. I'm not sure if there are parcels here, but these parcels would be connecting to the same feeder line.
Yeah, I wasn't clear in my question. Okay. So I wasn't wasn't so much concerned about the parcels in the neighboring town, but is there a substation posting bill that is within a somewhat reasonable distance of the town boundary? There's a lot of parcels on the southern boundary of the town that are zoned correctly. And is there a substation in the postal area that they can be reached by? That's all. Because right now the map kind of just terminates at the town boundary.
Good point. And actually, why to consider these parcels when there are available parcels here? And we'll check these parcels. And we will see that the limiting factor is the substation. This substation has currently 1.7 megawatt available. We'll show with the business model, not our business model, the NYSERDA pilot business model, that 1.7 megawatt with the current incentive, the project doesn't fly. So we are disqualifying these parcels. These potential parcels here are even farther distance, also disqualified.
Thank you.
No, very good questions. Thanks.
Luis, are you saying that the power plants that you want to, or the substations you want to hook up to don't have adequate supply right now, and that's why this project needs to happen?
Correct. There are 3 substations at this moment. In none of these substations there is available capacity. If in Sikaway substation, where we are proposing to connect our projects, we assume that these projects are rejected, then there will be available capacity in this substation. Not in North Troy, not in Brunswick. So we have checked that, okay, let's assume that these projects are not approved and there is available capacity. And we will do this exercise and we'll see that there are very few parcels which qualify for solar. What is this one? This is Duncan's former property where the supermarket is now under construction. We were in contact with Mr. Duncan family by, I would say, mid-2020. He was already committed to the supermarket. He rejected to sell or lease any of these portions for us. There is another parcel, Engels Farm, that we were in contact with Engels. They didn't want to sell or lease this parcel. And there is another one, which is this PDD, which belongs to the country club, I would say correctly, country club, which would a portion qualify for solar. We approached them, they didn't want to lease or to sell to us. Actually, when we bought, we are currently the owners of this parcel where we are proposing Brunswick. When we bought this parcel and we proposed to Country Club that, hey, I only ask you for a right of way to connect from our project to the national grid line. So not even 5 acres, not even 2 acres, only a right of way. They declined this option. So if we want to go to the conclusions is that yes, there are some parcels. Duncan, not available at this moment. Engels, they are not interested. PTD, they are not interested. We can check these parcels, but to make the long story short, it's either because the feeder line needs to be upgraded, and we know that it is $1 million per mile, or we need to upgrade the substation. I have provided some documentation from National Grid, I think it's Exhibit E, where an upgrade on a substation will be minimum $2 million. In the previous meeting, we explained that if Brunswick or Sikaway needs to be overcharged with $1 million for a 1 mile upgrade, that project will not fly. So the $2 million on top of a project, that kills the project. And $2 million for upgrade and substation is a very low number. I mean, I don't know, Ron, if you have some experience with National Grid, upgrading substation, but when you start protection equipment, mechanical structure, civil works, etc., 2 million is really, really low. Actually, we have a project in Coventry with NYSEG, not with National Grid, and the quotation has been 4.5 million to upgrade the substation. There was a mistake by NICET. They thought that there was available capacity for that substation. We made an application. They initially proposed, if I'm not wrong, $700,000 as the interconnection, which is aligned with the CISR studies that we have received here in Brunswick and Sikaway. And after a couple of months, they returned back to us and said, sorry, mistake by NICET. There is no available capacity. If you want to upgrade the substation, it's $4.5 million. And this is, I will not say normal, but considering that this is not a standard facility, this is a facility which is providing public service, must be redundant, must be safe. This 4.5 million, yes, if you ask me, I think that is inflated. Maybe it could be done by 3 million, but in any case, more than 1 million is killing the project.
Well, I think my question is though, is does the Hillcrest Avenue National Grid substation have enough power to currently supply all the needs and the draw for what the consumers are using in the area? Like without your project, is there a need there that this substation doesn't have enough power to supply the needs of the consumers in the area?
This has been a similar question from the town of Minnesota that we have addressed as well.
Let me try to answer that question because it has come up previously. And the answer is we're in a new era of electricity generation with the state's mandate to produce solar electricity to feed the grid and do it through a distributed process. So the answer is, in every community, you flip the switch and the lights go on. That was until the time when the state said, everybody, we need to mandate the requirement that we contribute so much solar. So the answer is, sure, there's a nuclear power plant in Oswego or the hydropower in Quebec is providing the service to the town of Brunswick. But if every community were to take the parochial idea that, well, our lights work, then we wouldn't build any of these anywhere in the state. And so it's a little different when you borrow from and the question came up with respect to the Rosenberg use variance standard for cell towers, which was that in that case, the question was posed, well, in those cases, there was no service. In reality, the original case had no service, but the more recent cases and iterations is that it's expanding the service, providing redundancies, and providing capacity and coverage relief. And similar to that is solar is necessary as we wean ourselves off carbon-based power and convert to a distributed system where each community is providing, in some sense, its own contribution to the grid.
And does any part of that 70% requirement take into consideration the cost factor of upgrading these lines that Luis is talking about at the $1 million of a mile cost?
Can you just say the question again?
So the requirement of the 70% solar that they want to reach that by the state standard, does any part of that, or is there any other granting or funding available from the state to try to meet this enormously high number at such a quick time to be able to provide funding to pay for this $1 million a mile feeder line upgrade?
Sure. To my knowledge, there is not a funding source that is being offered to the solar developers to fund the upgrade to either the distribution lines or the substations, where you'd say, okay, is the state government going to shoulder going through and upgrading all of these substations? My understanding is the answer is no. And I'd ask, correct me if I'm mistaken on that, but my understanding is no. There is no pot of gold where they're saying, hey, we'll come in and upgrade the substation, in the eastern part of the town so that the more accessible open lands are available to solar. The answer is no.
I just think that's the main concern, is that we're putting the cart before the horse here, is that there wasn't enough, I think investigation done by the state to put this wild number out there without even thinking about what the repercussions were. And these repercussions are that they don't want to upgrade the infrastructure, but they want to cluster these solar farms into areas where the infrastructure is there, and that's what we're trying to weigh.
Sure. Yeah, this, something very similar came up, a similar question in Binghamton. It's bound to come up, which becomes really a policy level question of whether, in a sense, we're for or against solar, you know, as a policy matter, as a societal matter. And, you know, I'm not able to necessarily wrangle, and I certainly don't want to argue those points, because that's, you know, I've never come into a community and thought that arguing was the best path to success. Rather, I think the answer is, right now, all of the solar developers are looking for locations that are accessible with respect to the grid, distribution lines, and the substations working. And then when you layer that on top of that, that's, I'll call it technical or engineering considerations, you layer that on the land use considerations. And so when the town adopted its land use revisions for solar, said, hey, we got plenty of land in the eastern part of the town that's wide open, put it there. No one took a look at, and I'm not criticizing this because I don't know that anybody anticipated it, that whether that was a good planning function to say, we'll just put them out there where there's a lot of land. The flip side would be is that the farmers are going crazy about this. Some farmers like it if they have extra land because it's income to them. Other farmers hate it because landowners that lease that property are going, hey, instead of $100 an acre for crops, I can get $1,000 an acre from solar. I'll take a tenfold increase, and now that farmer's got to travel further to find available land. So there's a real societal tension that's going on to implement this. But I think the best way to look at this from the land use perspective is that the public utility use variance standard at its core talks about, and I should have walked up with my notes, so I can do only so much of this off of the top of my head without resorting to notes eventually. But basically,
And Dave, a written submission on all of this is appreciated.
sure, absolutely. But the biggest thing that I'd like to point out is that in Rosenberg, is that when you're balancing the grant of the variance, the standard or the factors are correspondingly reduced when the impact on the community is similarly lessened. And so within that use variance, the case law history talks about the lessening of the burden on the applicant, where there's a corresponding lessening burden on the surrounding community. And so what I'm finding, and we found in Binghamton, is when you come into towns with a properly sited project that is appropriately buffered, put it in an area, while it does not meet the zoning standard as far as an allowed use, the corresponding reduction comes from the fact that it's properly sited. If it was at, you know, at the heart of Eagle Mills, and every car that went up Route 2 was driving by and could see the thing front and center, you chase me out of town, rightfully so. But what you do is when you come into a town with a project that no one can see from Route 2 and is buried in the trees and no surrounding residents can see it, it's the showing is correspondingly reduced. And so that's where this tension comes in. How do you balance this? Because, you know, what we're doing is we're providing high quality, properly sited projects to meet the standard. And after that, I have that in writing and I will transmit that.
That's fine, and the determination of the town of Binghamton will be interesting to review. More problem.
Absolutely.
I just think that it's not necessary to review the 100 pages.
No, listen, I think that discussion really gets to the heart of what the use variance application issues that the board has to address. And so the submission by Dave's office, I think, is now even more appropriate once that comes in and gets reviewed. I don't want to speak for the board, you can certainly pose any further questions, but I think the analysis from the technical side, the interconnection, the flow chart of what you go through, the NYSERDA business model, Ron's questions about the technical side, I think the board understands that record. This submission about the public utility use variance is standard, and if there is the decision for the town of Binghamton to review that is the next thing that I think the board should have and able to review.
Is it the interest of the board that we submit all the questions and all answers? Maybe there are some questions for the town of Binghamton that, well, the question and answer that we provide are interesting for you, and even though that initially didn't thought about this.
If there's a record that can be submitted from Binghamton, whether it's the public comments from the public hearing and the response to comments, if that will flesh out the record, certainly I think that's something.
I'm not so certain that there's a record beyond what we'll submit on the decision. The public hearing process reflected the fact, initially there were people that came out, and then by the end, over many months, no one came out anymore, because again, when they saw the analysis from the land use perspective that no one could see it, any opposition literally evaporated. When we got approval Monday night, there was literally no neighbor in the audience interested in it anymore. And that again goes to, in some sense, the board's sense of comfort with this concept derived from the fact that it was a well-situated project that was worthy of the variance on balance, because it was not impacting the larger community. But we'll certainly submit a lot of the same information that was submitted in Binghamton. But it's not as if there's reams of letters and responses to public comment. That it just did not engender that amount of controversy because it was well situated and well screened.
Dave, can I ask you, how many projects did Binghamton have come before them at the same time with this project that you just said was approved?
This was the first one, and there is a second one. It is not developed by us, but also developed by another group, and they will need to apply for a utility variance as well, because the same situation than us. There are plenty of land, but this land is useless. So this second group was waiting for the decision on the board of our project, following the recommendation of the supervisor, into the grounds, and now they will be applying the same utility variance.
Thank you.
There was a question from you, Mr. Lockrell, about in the past that you would like to have more visual impact perspective. We are working on this. When we work on a visual simulation, we work the visual simulation of the complete area, and then we produce a video that we show different angles. We do not produce a kind of photo montage. We do something more complex, more sophisticated. I promise you that by the next board, by the next meeting, I will have this presentation ready.
We have that submitted by the June meeting.
Absolutely.
So it's up to the board to determine if we want to put it on your.
Okay, we'll go ahead and then put you on the June 20th agenda.
Thank you. Good.
A lot of interconnection for this presentation.
I've gotten away from using the presentation boards on my other stuff as well. It's just trying to look at those 2 foot by 3 foot boards at this distance. I just find it's useless, and along with the projector as well. Good night, everyone. Thank you.
Thank
So then
Maybe.
our agenda items for the June 20th meeting will be a public hearing at 6 o'clock for Hickey, area variance, 6:15 for 662 Pinewoods, Brian Lee. And then Atlas Green.
Yeah.
Who?
Who's broke?
Oh, yeah, Leon, he's, what's he?
They were tabling that because of the zoning board,
Yeah.
the planning board.
Oh, we have to deliberate, is that what we're gonna do? So would that be before Atlas?
I think so.
So is there anything else?
I don't think so.
Okay, I made the motion that we adjourn the meeting. Second. Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
The meeting is adjourned.
Well, Ron, it kind of crystallized the whole issue tonight, right?
Actually,
I didn't have to raise it.
We're still, I think we're still on.
But it is interested to see what the town of Bennington did.
What, did I understand that they
I don't
were
know.
the first
I'm gonna go tell them.
solar
I didn't-
project that went before the town?
No, it wasn't clear to me whether they were saying that it was the, but I suggest that the meeting is adjourned. Okay, wow.